All right. Hopefully everybody got their brownies and their coffee so they can stay awake. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Daniel Totten. I'm the consulting architect for Ford Motor Company around our analytics program. Specifically, it's called the Global Data Insights and Analytics. With me is Tom Bryans. Tom Bryans is our delivery manager for Connected Vehicle. And Joe Nemec from Hortonworks, who's our resident architect, who's spending a lot of time with us, helping us get through a number of the items that we've got. So really what I'm going to talk about is really today is around our journey that we're taking, about the technology, the journey we've selected, building out our application, and then really one of the key things is the building of the application, but also really around how do we drive adoption. So we've got the technology, we've got organizations, we've got a number of items that are in play. So a little bit of just kind of press that we had got over the past really couple of years. I've had to blank out the names of these individuals because they didn't want to have too much press, and this was our communications team blanking a number of these things out. But a lot of different articles talking about the journey we took, and it really started. Not only there was connections both with what we've done organizationally, but also in terms of what Mark Fields, who's our CEO, kicked off at CES, and I think it was 2014 with our, actually 2015. So, but there's a lot of different items, and it's mostly around our use of big data and how we're trying to drive towards the next platforms. So just a couple of the key items here, and this is just obviously from one of the things that we've got in terms of the complexity, and really what I'm trying to highlight here as it relates to it is really the complexity of what we have in front of us, as well as what we're trying to accomplish and how we actually created an organization specifically to leverage the technology to make it most effective. So one of the key things here is around our volume. So obviously with volume, we've gotten a number of we've got vehicles, and within the vehicles, we've got a lot of the customers, we've got a lot of the manufacturing. So from a volume perspective, we're actually just getting more and more data coming through that from that standpoint. And then also from a variety standpoint, one of the key things with variety that we see is we're actually getting different types of data, not only the sensor data from the vehicles, autonomous vehicle, but also a lot of third-party sources that we're actually starting to ingest to be able to complement our solutions and our application that we've got in front of us. And then surveys, and then we also launched this year was our Ford Pass application. And so we've got a number of initiatives, marketing initiatives and other items that are related to that, which is creating a lot of the variety in the data sources that we have. Also from a velocity standpoint, the velocity is really around the speed at which we're actually getting that data and it's being delivered. So if you consider the fact that the data, the cars, as more of the connected vehicles are coming online, the speed at which that data is being delivered and us to actually have to analyze it is increasing that at a dramatic pace for us. So I'll just give you a few examples. Connected vehicle data in general, connected vehicle data is directly from the vehicles. It is our best opportunity to really understand how our customers use our products and help us in creating new ones. So on the slide is just a series of different examples, plug-in devices, data loggers, Archon machines that we use with our engineers to be able to collect that data and analyze the results, our sync app link, and then embedded modem. And we have an example over here. Tom, you want to? That's our OpenXC device. He's going to go ahead and pass it around.
What a catch.
We're the ones who play cricket and you throw it to her.
You throw it back too hard.
One of the examples that we're going to go into a little bit here is around our big data drive. This was actually an experiment. We've run a number of experiments. One of the key items that came out from Mark Fields when he introduced this at CES was the idea of experiments. And Tom talked about this in our presentation yesterday around our smart mobility initiatives. And Big Data Drive is really an example where we've got the car, we've got it available to us, the OBD2 ports, OpenXC, which is being passed around right now, the phone, tablet, the cloud, our Hadoop in the back end, as well as all of our analysis toolboxes. So as an example, one of the things we did with this particular experiment to be able to leverage it is we had volunteers. We have a number of vehicles that are management vehicles that are available, and we had volunteered to collect the data while they were doing their driving behaviors, using that OpenXC device as well as a number of other devices. So it's not just that device. We've got a number that we're trying to test and experiment to see which one provides us the richest amount of data and which is the most effective. Learning how people actually use their vehicle through this analysis is really one of the key items, and we keep learning and learning, especially as it links back into autonomous vehicle and other types of behaviors, so they're all kind of interconnected. We're improving the products and customer service, obviously looking at warranty and the impact that we have from early warning systems, diagnostic trouble tickets, conditions, and develop mobility solutions. So yeah, especially in Dearborn, and I don't know if you even saw it around here, Tom and I saw it the other day, we have a Palo Alto Research Innovation Center out here, and actually the Lincoln MKZ with LiDAR is driving around. That's one of our autonomous vehicles with a number of systems.
It was right down the street in front of us.
It sure was. So we've got that in Dearborn, and we've got that out here in Palo Alto. Here's an example of one of the things that we looked at early on with our Lincoln MKC and our Lincoln MKZ. Actually had a number of modems in it early on. Those modems have actually turned into, we updated this slide a little bit because in our 2017 vehicles that have, the 2017 Escape was really the first one that came out with a technology package that had even a richer set of data that was going to be able to flow through. But as an example, you know, the model year embedded modems include ambient temperature. And one of the things that we had looked at was, you know, comparing that with the weather stations. And really the image in the bottom right really represents the vehicles and the comparison between 5,000 connected vehicles compared to 2,500 weather stations. So there's a lot of sensors, and we've had examples where the idea of sharing data between, you know, weather as well as connected vehicle becomes an interesting opportunity, especially when you think about third-party data feeds and the relationship between the customer, weather, sensors, wipers going on, and a number of other items. So keep working through that. 6 million data points between January and July of 2015. So again, this was an experiment. The idea is to do it fairly quickly, stand it up, put that device in the vehicle, learn as quick and as much information as possible. Analysis across different time scales, by minute, across hour, across the day, and by day across months. So this is just an example of what we think happens within our vehicles in terms of the number of 25 gigabytes of data per hour. And then over time, we were really going to start to look at what that potentially leads us to in terms of our Hadoop ecosystem. It's going to be a lot of data that we have to be able to collect and analyze. Which really leads us into, when we think about this, the key item on there is we had the technology first. So it was really about 2 years ago, maybe 18 months ago, that we had our production offering. And with that, we actually, that was 18 months ago. In January of 2015, we actually hired Paul Ballou, who is our Chief Data and Analytics Officer. And Paul actually came in, and this is very important to be able to kind of level set. At Ford, we have what we call skill teams, and those skill teams are core investments that the company makes with product development, manufacturing. IT was really the last skill team that was created, and I think it was, 20 years ago that was created? Paul Ballou came in and actually created a whole brand new skill team called Global Data Insights and Analytics, GDIA for short. Not very short, but, and he started in January 2015 with about 3 people. So the technology had already been there, IT and GDIA started to partner, and one of the key items for Paul is to grow that team from 3 to where it is today, which is, let's put it, it's well above, I think, 500. And the way he's done that is to really centralize. We had data scientists spread out throughout the company. They were in pockets for product development, in manufacturing, at Ford Credit, you name it, we had data scientists, and there was consistent tools that they were leveraging, but there was inconsistency in terms of the fact that they had data from whether it was Teradata or a transactional system. So Paul basically wrangled all these individuals. If you're data scientists, if you're, I don't know if that's,
That was me.
Oh,
That was my phone ringing and my Bluetooth headset going into the microphone.
so anyways, Paul was able to wrangle a number of these people and say, if you're a data scientist, you are on this team. And basically the way he looked at it is he had data scientists, and as well as, what I'll kind of show you here in a minute, is the data operations / stewardship. So by having the technology and now having the actual people and having essentially the example of how am I going to actually leverage this data effectively. It's not intended to be bureaucratic. Paul is not about the process. He's really just trying to make sure that we have the right people with the right tools essentially to leverage this and really see through the vision of being able to, what we call, enable the analytics with all the data that we have access to. So it was a perfect marriage because we had the technology and now we actually are building out the organization. So I fit in a matrix where I'm IT, but I am embedded into the GDI organization as their architect to be able to help them realize this. So at the key, at the kind of the center point, we have to really realize that with all that data, and I know I was in a number of presentations where it keeps coming up, which is really related to what do you do with privacy. We're compliant, we protect the customer data at all costs is really our number one, and we have to be consistent in it. And we're bound by a number of regulations and all the different legal rules, global, different regional laws and everything else. So this is, we really bring this up and try and stress that what we really look at is how do we encrypt that data, how do we protect that data, and protect the customer's privacy on that. So one of the organizations that is embedded in the, as part of GDIA is our data operations. And this is really at the kind of the heart of, you've got data scientists that we've enabled to be able to actually get the data to them, and then there's a matter of being able to kind of pair the data scientists with then an operations team that is responsible for the standards, as well as working with the data scientists to take those items that they find and actually realize it through the standards and make that available to a broader audience. Because our data scientists are small in number in comparison to the broader audience, but we have a high demand for consuming the analytics, and the data scientists are at the early end of it. The standards help take those rules, apply those transform rules so that a much higher percent, I'd say it's probably be about an 80-20, 20% would really represent, maybe even smaller, 10% are the data scientist view in terms of the tools they use, and then we end up having the idea of making that more available to a broader audience. It really starts with identifying internal and external data sources. So the vision that really came through is we have legacy in front of us because we're a 100 plus year old company. And one of the things that we had is a number of transactional systems that are high value and have been ranked with a number of items that said if I can actually get this data into Hadoop, I can actually start to do analytics that I haven't been able to do before. So our goal has always been how do I take that data in a consistent framework and actually start to pipe that data in so that I can turn the data scientists on as well as turn the data standards team on. And from that, we're going to start to realize a number of things, whether it's time series that we couldn't do or whether it was just being able to get the hands of data from warranty to product and manufacturing all the way to the customer and kind of stitch those items together and have a consistent way of being able to realize different values that we couldn't see before. Primarily because those transactional systems were very much specifically designed for application one, and application one really from a security standpoint was granted access to it, and then you had another one, and now we've tried to break those barriers down. So one of the key items is really managing data as an asset. And to accomplish that, that's exactly what we do. We've identified the sources, we've started to pipe those sources in with the whole intent, and then tying this back into some of the technologies is really how do I manage that? Well, I make that available through data dictionaries, a global data dictionary, and indexing that data that's in Hadoop in order for others to be able to consume it and be aware of what is the highest value asset that we have for a customer number or for a product or for a particular part. So those are all the things that they're trying to do. And if you think of on the scale that we're at, we have, let's say, thousands of different applications just in the current applications that we have, let alone the number of actual third-party feeds, as well as manufacturing, product mount, as well as the vehicle. So it's fairly large in scale. The other prize is really being able to set that as a standard, the enterprise level standard, data standards and governance. Again, this is where you're pairing both the data scientists who may not have the standard yet, but in working with the actual the data governance team by a specific value stream. So they've actually divided up that data governance organization by value stream, where they actually have individuals who focus on manufacturing and apply those particular standards for manufacturing, and then they work with the data scientists to realize what are those data points to be able to then index those and then make that to a broader community of individuals that can actually consume it. So a lot of times our GDIA organization starts to feel like, and they'll argue, is it really are they really the business? Are they IT? They'll argue in many ways that they're kind of both, because by ingesting the data and being able to standardize that data, the end consumer or the business unit, whether it's warranty, manufacturing, marketing, sales, all have now a richer set of data that they can actually consume consistently. And so that's why I say that it's fascinating to see that you have a new skill team that has never been done before, and they've wrangled all these people together with process and a number of teams. And the demand for using the data and the demand for tools is really something that we haven't been able to actually anticipate before. Every week I get another request that says, I've got a new tool, I want to install it, and so this experiment, this idea of this emerging space that we had is really becoming dynamic in terms of how quickly can I provide a tool for the individuals that need that. So it's growing. We've got, and that all leads to then reports and dashboards that are consistent for the community at large to be able to consume. So this is where we really have tried to link the two together, where the vision of the data supply chain, which is what the application is called, as well as our reference architecture. So this is our analytics reference architecture that we leverage. This in and of itself is a 5-year program. We are in year 3 of this initiative. And the goal out of this was to really start to, if you really think about it, we've got at the bottom layer, we've got transactional systems represented, external sources, the vehicle, and the goal is we've got a land and transform area, which is Hadoop for us. We also do a lot of data ingestion. We are trying to get to the point where we are doing real-time change data capture and scoop and other types of initiatives to be able to speed up the delivery of that data into that. And that's specifically for some of our transactional, and then obviously connected vehicle takes a different path. On the left-hand side, we've got items like our data governance and index. So that's the idea that as we've piped that in, we need to be able to have an index, a view into what all the data is that we have, and what are the standards that are going to be applied by that data governance organization and stewards. And then we also have like a foundational data layer, discovery zone. We have the idea of real-time streaming. How do we pipe all that data together? So it describes the components needed to build any and all of the analytic applications, and it is used to guide our technology choices. So as part of this, we actually put a technology roadmap together, and we put a year, what we have in working together, what we have components for, and gaps. And we look at that at about a 5-year clip. And one of the key things is actually 5 years, as we've actually started to realize, is too long, because what I've put in terms of capacity for us to actually deliver on is still too slow. So there's constant churn around what data. We've just engineered solution X, and then we have to go on to the next one. So everything that's on that list seems like it's already dated, and we're refreshing that at a much faster pace. And the challenge is how do we keep up with that technology as it relates back to being able to deliver the application that's really seen as a differentiating for Ford to be able to realize. So what we did in order to try and kind of link the two, because if the two got too far apart, in other words, if the reference architecture got too far out of date as it relates to our GDIA and data scientists and other ones trying to actually be able to say, look at tools, if those got too far apart, what we've done is we've linked those two together to have at least a reference point of what do we have in our inventory of tools available to us? So as one example, advanced analytics in the upper right-hand corner is one of the critical areas that we had. We use a number of tools in that space for different types of algorithms. And we actually had, I think now we've engineered 5 different solutions in that space for the variable types of data scientists we have. They want to use a particular algorithm, and one vendor might be better at another. So what we're actually doing is documenting and trying to understand that. So when a request comes in, we can vet it at says, we already have that technology, why would we not just try and extend the usage of it versus trying to bring in another technology? So personal preference definitely is a factor that we're trying to kind of minimize because everybody has a personal preference, whether I use SAS or whether I use Anaconda. We're just trying to minimize that so that we can really kind of target what we need to deliver. So what we start with is really around kind of loading the data. And in load data, it's really the idea of identifying the sources of data that we have. So it's all about the acquisition of the data. And that sounds fairly simple in nature. I can tell you that after a number of lists, as I said, 4,000 plus applications that we've had to inventory at Ford, and then to be able to actually basically provide a value proposition for each one of those and force rank those to which one is going to provide us the most value immediately. So I need to do that the fastest. So maybe our manufacturing systems are up at the top because we'd like to be able to get that in. We think that that's the highest area for us to save money going forward. So we force rank that. We have to actually then be able to start to load that data and move forward. And that really is an inventory of it. It's the acquisition. Now, when it comes to acquisition, it sounds like a simple game. However, this is where, and I think that if you've seen before where we've got our infinity symbol where we have core technologies, our manufacturing, everything else, we have emerging. One of the things that ends up happening is the idea that we're supposed to be one Ford. That's kind of one of our mantras out there. Well, there's an application, and let's call it a factory application. And in that factory application, there's an owner, and that owner has always traditionally been responsible for the security of it. Now I've got an organization that is actually going to ingest every one of those applications. And so GDIA comes to the door and says, we're taking your data. And there's usually hesitation, and there's usually, wait a second, that's my data. And what we've had to do is really work towards getting the idea that this is not your data, this is one Ford working together to be able to realize that vision. Now, the benefit that we have, and the whole reason that I brought up earlier about this idea of a skill team, is the fact that the investment in that skill team has made it easier for us to be able to really take advantage of that technology. Because Mark Fields, our CEO, has essentially bought into this. And he's very big on what we're trying to accomplish. And any barriers that we face, we have to understand those risks. But Mark Fields, for us to have that kind of support from the highest levels is critical for the success of this particular type of initiative that we've got going forward. So it's a balance of bringing the tools, balancing of giving the actual organization as an enabler for bringing this data through and actually starting to realize the capabilities that we think we have. So once we've actually gone through, and we take a load raw strategy at this point. So we've got the environment, and we've got the applications, and we've got them lined up to start to ingest. And we've basically said, and we've talked with our team, especially data scientists, and said, rather than doing a transformation, which feels very much like, all right, give me your business requirements, let's transform it, we've basically said we're taking load raw, we're taking the data as is, and we're piping it in. And we realize some of it is going to be usable, some of it's going to be unusable, but the intent is the speed at which we can actually give them the data so they can churn through it and actually find those particular insights is the key. Then we, from the help of the data scientists, we actually start to do our transformations. Some of those are much more broader than other times. Sometimes we can actually leverage the transformations from previous transactional applications that were realized in our other data marts and other types of initiatives. So we can kind of lift that over. So from the transformation, which actually includes master data management, it includes identity resolution. So think of transformation as a very large pot of this data to be able to transform it, identity resolution, mastering it. The idea of trying to actually get to that kind of single version of the truth for customers, single version of truth for product. So they're doing a number of those initiatives, including mastering particular elements of data to be able to kind of bring that through. Then at the end, once that data has been curated and sort of gone through the standards and made available to the broader audience, then you've got appetite for the actual applications to come in and actually consume that and really realize that through the visualizations of whether it's on a dashboard or even in other types of tools that are going to kind of consume that data forward. So that's really the end state of really being able to enable those particular analytics. So when you consider that we've got the technology, we started with technology, then we were fortunate enough to actually have an organization that came in and started to actually take advantage of it and really stress the technology for us to be able to use it and to really start to say we've got to take advantage of this capability. Then all of a sudden it's a matter of this isn't not how do you drive that adoption, how do you get success out of that? And this is where I think the GDI team really spent a lot of time because a lot of these initiatives can fail. And one of the key things that they really started to highlight is really where are we in the journey and where do we need to go and how do we make that successful? So just by putting data into Hadoop isn't enough, right? We have to have those standards in play. The base of the pyramid is really where the significant, we're really trying to democratize that data. How do you do that over time? So we start with reports. And in that, it's the what happened. And that, that's been where we've been for a long time. Descriptive. We have actually got, within GDIA, there's pockets of people that focus on descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. They're actually organized in the way to be able to highlight that. You also have why did it happen? So in your predictive area, why did it happen? And then as you go up the pyramid, you really start to look at the prescriptive. What should I do? Right? So as we start to have the data and we have time series, and then I'm starting to be able to identify that, it gives us a whole new opportunity of being able to leverage new tools and technologies to be able to actually predict. And then obviously at the top, change the outcome, act earlier. So especially when you think about our connected vehicles and the ability for us to actually leverage that data, and especially the best example is always warranty. How can I identify a potential problem sooner in the mix? And I can actually stop the production of, if I stop it early enough, I've prevented thousands more vehicles being produced with the potential of that warranty claim. So those are all items that really help us start to realize that. So the team actually is really vigilant about trying to do the education. And it's an interesting one because it's not traditional in the sense that you've got a training class that's not only the tools, right? So they're not focusing on the tools, but the data scientist training. So they're looking at the visualization techniques, the analysis techniques. They're trying to refine that. By having a number of data scientists that have come across from different areas within the organization to actually take advantage of that and start to socialize the best practices out of each one of those. Somebody came from manufacturing, someone came from product development, someone came from Ford Credit. Ford Credit is very large in terms of knowing how to write a lot of different types of algorithms. Multiple training methods, from online to classroom, and just doing it together. We do a lot of workshops where we want to make sure that they understand the value of some of the tools that we have. And then access to tools. And that's the key. Access to tools will follow once we've actually gone through that education training. Now that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people because usually it's on our Ford store, someone wants to download it, but one of the key things is they've really put a gate in front of that to make sure that the adoption that they have for that particular tool or tools has been realized so that we know we're using it effectively. I'm not using the wrong tool for the wrong type of service. And then really balancing access with education. As I said, our initial item that we had to kind of learn through was the idea that we've got Mark Fields. Mark Fields says, go get the data. I go knock on the door, and they slam the door and say, you can't have access to data. We're really protecting the application from the risk of you pulling data in and causing disruption. Well, let's change that, right? So it's why not, right? We've really tried to adopt a different type of principle, and culturally, that's exactly one of the key initiatives that we see is that new within our emerging spaces ability to say why not. This transformation of our culture to accept that and to actually start to think a little differently. So really, democratization doesn't make someone a data scientist. It is critical that people know when and where to get the help. And that's really leveraging that. So improved access, improved tools, and the efforts will really be focused on building the company's capabilities versus simply passing out the IDs into tools. So, and that is really trying to help. And that's it. Questions?
So you mentioned all of those applications that you vet in the rank
Yes.
to become part of your pipeline. From your intake strategy for a given application or a given data source. Oh, I'm sorry. So for your ingest strategy and for business value discovery for a given data source, do you take all data in of that application, or do you have a process that you go through where you vet and rank data within an application individually?
Once the app, it's a good question. I think they heard the last part, which is really within that ranking of all the applications. Is there a subset of that we kind of take a percentage of the data that's even higher value and kind of rank that? We actually take all the data. So once we've identified a metric that says this application has high value, we're not then filtering it. We take the entire gambit of it and we just start to load it. Okay, we're not looking to filter it. We're looking to say, I'm not looking to apply any business rule on top of it to say, well, let me take one part of it. No, we're just taking the whole thing. So we've got the space, we're going to leverage it, and we're going to filter out as we go forward. So, other questions?
How do you work with tools like snapshots from Progressive? Do you integrate the data? Do you compete with them?
That's a good question. How do we integrate, or how do we take data from the insurance company is what you're asking in terms of...
That's doing the same job as you do.
Well, that is a good question. I don't think we actually have any partnership within that. We have our own data that we collect, and I know the insurance companies have their own devices for different purposes. Now, that seems like an interesting opportunity to be able to connect the two.
Okay.
Yeah, if I were to even add on to that, I would say that when you're thinking about, probably from an insurance standpoint, I'm more worried about your user behavior, right? And in a predictive maintenance standpoint, I'm interested in a significant more of the mechanical behavior in the vehicle than potentially just the user.
And the use is different, but the data should be the same.
No, but there's significantly more sensors that are related to mechanical items than just behavioral human items.
It's a smaller subset of the data for that. Other questions?
Can you speak a little bit about business value that you might have already realized with this new approach in GDIA, or what you're going after in terms of either reducing cost or improving safety?
There are initiatives that we've already, there are a number of initiatives that already provided value. A lot of them now are cost savings in terms of actually being able to realize, finding defects at a plant and being able to actually run particular different types of algorithms to try and prevent that. But overall, it's not a matter of it's all of that from a business value standpoint. Right now it started with really kind of a SWAT team approach of being able to load that data while this application is starting to come online and be able to take it to more of an enterprise level. It's been pockets of value throughout the organization. Some of them are cost savings, some of them are just deduplication efforts. So there are a number of initiatives that we've seen the value. And those are initiatives that have actually been provided back to Paul Ballou and the senior leadership to say, this is working, but we do need to start that pace even faster. So.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Oh, right here.
You mentioned that you had the technology and started from there, so it seems like there was already commitment from leadership to build this approach. I'd be curious how you got to that point, or where did the commitment come from?
All right, so that's actually post my time frame. I'm fairly new. I came in July, and it was 2 years. So I'm going to actually turn that over to Tom, who's going to smile and kind of laugh. There were a number of POCs that we ran early on, but Tom, you want to?
It started with the vehicle data, and we knew we were going to start collecting vehicle data, so we had to build a platform to house that. And then some smart people said, well, we've got this vehicle data, what can we combine it with? We've got all this other data, let's start with maybe customer data, right? And let's bring our customer data into that platform and combine it with the vehicle data. And from there, it kind of said, well, what about manufacturing data? What about product development data? What about test data? So it grew from there.
Yeah, so the need to meet vehicle scale then led itself naturally to bringing in additional data sets.
Question over here.
You mentioned when Paul came in that he consolidated a lot of like the data science teams and that. I know we see that sort of pendulum swinging back and forth between consolidating resources and sort of taking them out of the business units. How do you try to, in a consolidated manner, try to stay responsive to the business needs, domain knowledge, timeframes that they need? We just see that swing back and forth.
That's been actually one of the challenges. So the blend on that one is, while the data scientists have been all wrangled together and the organization is all underneath one umbrella, they've also sort of, I didn't kind of go into the details of the layers, but they've identified sort of the data scientists that are responsible for manufacturing. But they work so close together because we've really started to, on a side note, they've actually started to convert over buildings to be a little bit more collaborative workspaces, so that communication occurs across the manufacturing, the product development. They're all in the same building, but they may, Logan here may be responsible for manufacturing and Samantha may be responsible for product development, but they're sitting together to be able to work through those particular problems. Now, the second part of your question, I didn't follow the second part.
It was related just keeping the domain knowledge, specific to like credit or manufacturing, and also the responsiveness timeframes. A lot of times the business units like owning their BI because they can say, I need this yesterday.
They do, and that's one of the, that's where the speed at which we're trying to turn this up is really important. What we found is the demand for this application is actually grown beyond really where we're at today. So as an example, an application will come say, I don't want to do all this transformation work. If this is going to be in the data supply chain, I want to take advantage of it. When is it going to be available for me? Okay, and usually the answer is, well, you're 435 on the list out of 4,000. That'll be next year. So then what do we do to be able to kind of offset that? Now, it gets a little dicey, but we created an environment. We said by enabling and doing self-service, we said to bridge that gap, especially for those that are really close, we're actually leveraging what we call our discovery zone. We're allowing people to actually start to load that data early on to be able to start to work with it. And then the goal is that they'll snap it at some point in time when the data actually comes in, and then the GDI will take over those initiatives so that then they can consume it at the back end.
So kind of like a sandbox?
Yeah, very much so.
I can ask.
I'll repeat the question.
No, I didn't get it. How do you get the data from the vehicles? If you can a little bit throw a light on how the data comes from the vehicle, where you collect.
You missed the presentation yesterday. You missed the presentation yesterday. We went through that. So real quick in a nutshell, vehicle usually travels up to the cloud and then to the back end. And we retrieve it via various means. We can stream it using Storm through AMQPS. We have secure FTP to get it, but mainly with our embedded modems, it's streaming through Storm.
What's the storage in the cloud? Where do you store it? What's the storage?
On our enterprise data platform, it's Hadoop. No, back-end data center.
On-prem.
Yeah, it stays up on the cloud for about 90 days to support features, but it's persisted back in the data center.
What's the storage medium on the cloud? Where do you hold the data?
Good question. I'm not sure. You know that, Joe?
So today, all the vehicle streaming data lands in Azure Event Hub. Great.
Other questions?
This will be probably the last one.
Thank you. So traditionally, from the vehicle manufacturing company, we get the recall notification through dealer. Is there any plan that the recall information, if there is any potential problem, the owner should get notified directly from the car manufacturing company?
So, it's a good question, actually, with the Ford Pass application, and I've been experimenting with it myself with my vehicles. If I do have a recall notice and I've actually entered my VIN, I'll actually have that notification in my Ford Pass application to let me know of a particular problem, and then I can actually schedule a service with my favorite dealership. So we're getting there, and that is kind of a gateway for us to actually be able to leverage it.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.